recorded in a paranormal setting, the actual way they're composed is different. So we actually sort of came across some of this when we were working on Battersea Poltergeist. Research had been done into the actual composition of the audio, the actual waves themselves.
So you are not ruling out that the radio incident could be paranormal?
We know that historically in paranormal cases you have interference with electronics, and if that's the case, then there's no reason as to why audio can't be manipulated.
Interesting. You mentioned one of our other cases there, the Battersea Poltergeist, and there's something else here that reminds me of that case. The idea of a trigger object. Now, people might remember that in Battersea Poltergeist, a key appeared on Shirley's pillow, and the family felt that all of the phenomena followed from that. Here, it's almost as if when they turn the dial on that radio, it somehow unleashes something.
Absolutely. We've discussed trigger objects, that there's this one thing that you either touch or move, and right away from then, everything else sort of kicks off. Within 30 seconds of that happening, the first noises begin.
That thud that only Scott and his cousin can hear. And then, Deborah, we have the footsteps. Now, we've had footsteps before in 1 or 2 of our cases, but never quite on this scale or for this length of time. What did you make of them?
First thing I've noticed about footsteps is that they are a very common thing associated with hauntings. They're also an incredibly common thing associated with sleep paralysis.
Okay, we've mentioned sleep paralysis before in season 1, but for people not so familiar with it, just remind us.
Your body, when you're dreaming, is paralysed, and that's a very good reason that you shouldn't act out your dreams. It would be dangerous. But sometimes when you're overtired, when you're stressed, you can accidentally get some phenomena of wakefulness and some phenomena of sleep at the same time. If you wake up in a paralysed body, it's as though there is a dream in your waking environment. And if you can think of some of the horrific things you've seen in a dream, it is truly, truly terrifying. And if you didn't believe in ghosts before you had the experience, you certainly would by the time you'd finished.
It's fascinating. I've had it myself, and it is truly horrible. And we're getting here into that territory we've had before, particularly with Ken in room 611. Is our witness asleep or awake? Evelyn, as with Ken, Scott is utterly convinced he's awake. And he has that incredibly visceral, frightening experience of the bed apparently shaking.
I've suffered with sleep paralysis since I was a child, and I have never had the bed shaking. The bed shaking fits the pattern of escalation that we're looking at here. In poltergeist cases, you've got, the kind of trigger object, and then it's the noises, and then it escalates, and then it escalates.
Okay, let's see exactly how this escalates, because to use a very Newfoundland-appropriate image, everything so far is just the tip of the iceberg. Let's go straight back to Scott. He's lying there in sheer panic as the bed seemingly moves.
I remember pulling the duvet over my ears and just, willing this to stop. It did stop. At that point, I felt the duvet being pulled off me, so I sort of half turned. Then Callum flies out of bed.
Holy crap, Scott, what do you mean?
He sort of sailed through the air right over me. My memory of it is that he is closer to the ceiling than he is to the bed. It felt like someone had picked him up and tossed him.
You feel that something threw him across that room?
That's certainly how it felt to me.
Scott, I have to ask a question that I think all of the skeptics listening will have in their heads. This is not Callum falling out of bed.
No. I'm on one side of the bed, he's on the other, and he goes over me and straight to the side of the room underneath the window. If he'd stood on the edge of the bed and said, "Watch this," and then jumped, I don't know that he'd have made it that distance. And he lands on the floor, and I remember thinking, this is the most afraid I've ever felt in my whole life. It became clear that he was not of his own mind almost. I was whispering, Callum, please get back in bed. At this point, the room just suddenly felt freezing cold. And I feel this more now. That's why I'm getting a little bit spine-tingly talking about this, but I feel sort of ashamed that I didn't do more than just sit there and say, please get back in bed. That was really the loneliest moment. The shame of not helping him, plus the abject fear of being, oh no, now I'm on my own again.
But is Scott on his own? Because now he feels his attention being pulled up from Callum to that object that he fears the most.
I still did not want to look in that mirror. Like, if I looked in that now, I would see something, presumably whatever had lobbed him across the room. And I just remember thinking, Scott, just don't look.
But you do look.
Yeah. And I could make out the image of some sort of like dark shape, something dark. standing there in the room on the other side of the bed.
Scott lies there for what feels like an eternity. And then he hears footsteps again.
And this time, they came to a halt right outside our door, and the door was pushed open. And I thought, oh, thank God, here's Dad. It's time to get up, we're going to be on our way. And I kind of waited, praying that he might just belatedly say, come on. But instead it was just someone standing there for maybe a minute, and then pulled the door, and then footsteps walked down the corridor and vanished again.
It wasn't your dad.
It wasn't my dad.
It's time to rejoin our experts. There is so much to discuss here, but we have to leap straight in, I think, with what happened to Callum. Deborah, this is extraordinary. This is unlike anything, I think, that we have seen in season 1. Surely there is no rational way that we can explain somebody flying through the air across a bedroom.
Somebody actually flying through a bedroom, no, but then we're assuming that that is actually what happened. Bear in mind we have one witness for this. Callum is asleep. So we have Scott's interpretation. We know that he'd gone to bed early that night, which would have affected his sleep cycles. We know he was in a strange place with creepy floorboards, and that the whole family had been upset by the radio incident. And we also know that the landlord had come in and said, have you seen the ghost yet? So to me, this is a situation where Scott is absolutely primed.
Evelyn, just to go back to Battersea Poltergeist again, that was a case that featured alleged levitation, but even that wasn't on this scale. It seems so fantastical, but is it possible?
On the Bat Polk case, we talked about things being like psychogenic seizures. It seems as if the body is levitating because it's moving in such a way and is so stiff. But this feels different because Callum is literally above him. He says it's closer to the ceiling than it is to the bed. It is as if someone has picked him up and lifted him out of bed. So how on earth does Callum get thrown on the floor so violently and is still asleep the entire time without some sort of unseen force exacting upon him?
The idea that a paranormal force could have a physical impact on a person is really frightening.
It is. We like to think of these things as being passive. We see ghosts, we see shadows in the night, but when you get into cases where there is really extreme physical interaction, those are the most terrifying ones.
Deborah, after that moment, Scott is clearly in this abject state of terror, which culminates in him seeing a dark figure in the room, something that for me had real Room 611 vibes. How do we explain that?
I've seen all sorts of things in my bedroom at night. Sometimes these things can fade away after a few seconds and you realise it was just a pile of clothes or something, a bit of furniture in the corner. But for a while, it really seems as though it's a figure. And it's because we have evolved for survival, not truth. We're aware of things that could potentially be dangerous to us, and we interpret them in the forms that they could be dangerous to us. Intruders in an unknown environment are even scarier. You don't know the escape routes. This isn't your own home. This is a strange place with strangers in it.
Evelyn, it's so interesting that he sees the figure in the mirror. They featured in a few of our cases, and you've spoken before about the significance of mirrors in the paranormal, that idea that they can become a gateway.
Absolutely. So the mirror instantly transforms. The second you see it, it's no longer simply a mirror. It becomes almost like a psychomantium. A psychomantium, it was popularised by Raymond Moody, who was also the person who came up with the term near-death experience. It was basically a small mirrored chamber that was kept very dark. It would be illuminated only by a single candle or a very dim light bulb. And people were to gaze into this reflected darkness and communicate with the dead. So in this case, the whole room takes on this sort of psychomantium chamber.
So do you feel in this moment that Scott is witnessing the dead walk again?
I couldn't say if what he sees is dead, but I do believe that he sees the thing that is causing a lot of this phenomena that feels like the first point of contact.
Thanks both. It's such an intriguing case, and as ever, we come down to that thing about how reliable Scott's testimony is. Can he be sure that he wasn't asleep? Did he really witness these things? Well, we may have some more clarity on that in just a moment, because I want to go back to Scott now, on the morning after his night from hell.
Outside, it looked beautiful and sunny, and there's this picturesque view of the bay, and suddenly the night that we just had, it just seemed like something from another planet altogether.
Maybe Scott could dismiss it all as a bad dream, albeit some strange shared one with Callum. He could go for breakfast and file it away as a nightmare in a strange bedroom. Except for one thing. One thing that will utterly change the course of this investigation.
So I went downstairs, and my mum was sitting in the armchair near the foot of the stairs, grey face, ashen face. But my first thought was, oh no, they've had a big row. And I thought, this is going to be horrible.
But Scott's wrong. That look on her face, what was it really?
Fear.
Because something had happened in your parents' room too.
Yeah, it wasn't just us. And she was absolutely terrified by what happened.
That is the end of this episode. But it is not the end of this story. This is a double episode summer special. So start sending me your questions and theories now. Was that fisherman flesh and blood or a phantom? Can somebody really fly across a room? Email me, uncanny@bbc.co.uk, or find me, Danny Robbins, on social media. There is so much more to come in this case, because next time on Uncanny, get ready to meet Scott's dad, Brian, as we find out what happened in the room next door.
I was scared for my family, but my wife wouldn't let me leave that room because she was absolutely terrified.
Uncanny was written and presented by me, Danny Robbins. It was co-produced by me and Simon Barnard. Our editor and sound designer is Charlie Brandon King. Music is composed by Evelyn Sykes. Our theme tune is by Lanterns on the Lake. This is a Bafflegap production in association with Uncanny Media for BBC Radio 4.
I know what I saw. I know what I saw.
BBC News at midnight. This is Andrew Peach.